Chapter 9. Peg lay back on the soft grass, letting the sunshine seep through her skin and warm her bones. She'd promised Danny to find out what she could about the Parkers and Miss Hennessy, and now he wanted her to tell everything she already had learned. But what did she really know that she could tell? Miss Hennessy had been a guest in their home, quiet and shy but friendly. Ma trusted her. Her suspicions were only that, suspicions, with no proof behind them. How could she tell Danny about Miss Hennessy's cousin, who was one of Quantrill's raiders, about the deception under which Miss Hennessy and she were traveling as mother and daughter? Miss Hennessy had given Peg perfectly good explanations, and Peg had decided to accept them, but with Danny, what if he insisted on being the big protective brother and suspiciously jumped to the wrong conclusions? If all goes well, you'll be able to visit Danny often, Miss Hennessy had said. Everything has to go well. It has to, Peg told herself. What's the matter that the Parkers don't have farm animals? What difference does it make if they live on a farm or in town? Who knows? Who cares? I'm not going to let silly suspicion spoil my trip to see Danny. A fistful of grass blades landed on Peg's face. She sat up, shaking her head and sneezing. Well, Danny asked, what can you tell me about Miss Hennessy? She's nice, Peg said. That's all? That's all. Ma likes her, so do I. Trying to ignore the small but growing guilt that made her stomach ache, Peg scrambled to her feet. Come on, Danny, she said, and held out a hand. Let's run down to the river. I can skip stones further than you can. Danny stood, and Peg was surprised once again at how fast he had grown. I bet you're taller than Mike now, she said. I was already taller by an inch when he came through St. Joe 2 years ago. Danny suddenly grinned and said, I got a better idea than skipping stones. I set up targets at the edge of the woods. I'll show you how a good shot I am. Peg reluctantly trailed after Danny as he got his rifle from the house and led her to the practice area. You don't have to show me, she complained. I believe you. I'm really good, he bragged. I want you to see. Danny found Peg a place to stand, and behind him, far enough away so the crack of the rifle wouldn't hurt her ears, he raised his rifle and tugged on the tattered, round-ringed target that had been nailed onto the broad trunk of an oak tree. Take that, you bushwhackers, Danny grunted and squeezed the trigger. Peg watched a small piece of cloth near the center of the target rip as the bullet struck it. Sickened, she clutched her stomach. Danny turned to face her, pride shining in his eyes. Got him, one less reb. Don't do that, Danny, Peg shouted. It's only a target, it's not a reb. Someday it will be a reb, Danny said, as soon as I enlist to fight for the Union. You can forget that, Peg insisted. You're not going to shoot rebs. You're not going to war. I'm older than Mike was when he enlisted, and he was too young. He's still too young, and so are you. I won't be 13 forever. The war's going to end soon. Everybody says so. And everybody's dreaming. Oh, Danny, Peg wailed. Maybe it was her own fear. Maybe it was remembering Mike's eyes when he returned from battle, but like a dark spirit hovered over Danny. like a dark spirit that hovered over Danny, a terrible premonition caught and shook her. If you go to war, you'll be killed. I know it. You will. Danny sighed. I wouldn't have brought you here if I'd known you'd act like such a baby. Don't you see, Peg? I have a duty to my country. I love the Union. I want to help protect it. But not by fighting. Yes, by fighting. There's other ways to help the Union. You don't understand, Danny said. He turned his back to her, reloaded his rifle, and aimed once again at the target. Peg watched in misery as the bullet hit its mark. You don't understand, Danny had said, ignoring all that she told him. What had happened to Danny, who'd always been close to her? He built a wall without a door, and she couldn't come through. Hugging her shoulders, Peg waited silently until Danny had finished his show of marksmanship. You have to admit I'm a good shot, he said. Peg nodded. Yes, you are. Carrying his rifle in the crook of one arm, Danny grinned and put his other arm around Peg's shoulders. As they walked toward the house, he squinted up at the sun and said, It should be near 3 o'clock. Miss Hennessy will come and get you before long. Peg leaned close to him, frantic that the time was almost up. I'll be back soon, she said. Miss Hennessy said she would invite me to travel with her again when she comes to visit her sister. She promised. Good. Giving her shoulder a squeeze, Danny said, because of the Union patrols, Buchanan County's been quiet lately. While you were on the road, you probably met up with a patrol, didn't you? One, Peg said, and turned to face Danny, so Danny couldn't see her eyes. Miss Hennessy had a letter of safe passage given to her by our provost marshal, so the sergeant let us through. I can't tell Danny the rest of what happened, Peg thought. He wouldn't understand. From the start, she realized that she had built a wall, too, a wall that she wouldn't allow Danny to break through. We've heard about the patrols have been hard on some of the people who were resisting when Missouri was kept under martial law, Danny said, but they keep down the bushwhackers, at least they have locally. I hear there's plenty of the skirmishes in southern Missouri, especially in the border counties. There was so much pride in Danny's voice as he spoke of Union patrols that Peg was glad she hadn't told him about the soldier who had stolen Miss Hennessy's money. She doubted Danny would have believed it had happened. Peg scarcely had time to brush the grass and tangles from her hair and securely tie on her sunbonnet before Miss Hennessy arrived. They left with a carton containing 2 jars of Annie's special sweet cucumber pickles, a sack of fresh eggs, and a fat loaf cake. Give these to your dear mother with the greatest affection, Annie told Peg, who tried not to grin. Peg had no doubt that Annie really did like Ma, but wasn't that only because Alfred had married Annie, instead of following the plan Peg and Danny had once worked out to bring Ma west as Alfred's bride? On the return trip, Miss Hennessy seemed happier and more relaxed. Did me a world of good to see my sister again, she said. Nellie hasn't changed a bit. She's always so cheerful, no matter how difficult things may be. You mean like not having any livestock? Peg blurted out. I told you their stay in the area will be short. Embarrassed, Peg's face grew hot. I know, it's just that, well, on a farm I expect a dog to run out and meet us, and one didn't, and I listened, I couldn't hear chickens, and as Peg's voice trailed away, Miss Hennessy nodded. You're very observant, and you're right. Lewis once had a fine house and good stock, but he has plans to start farming again. He has no plans to start farming again, at least not till the war's over. Was his livestock stolen? Yes, and his house burned. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, too, but I'm grateful their lives were spared. Where were they when this happened? In southern Missouri, near the Arkansas border. Bushwhackers? Yes, one of the rebel gangs. A note of bitterness crept into Miss Hennessy's voice. In Missouri, it's hard to be pro-Union. It's also hard to be pro-Southern. If it's not the bushwhackers, it's the military patrols. Peg squirmed on the buggy seat, wishing it was softer. Why don't your sister and her husband leave Missouri? They will someday. She sighed before she answered. I'll go too, maybe to California. I've always wanted to see San Francisco. As the horse and buggy clopped and clattered around the bend through the trees, Peg caught a glimpse of Union Blue. A patrol, she whispered, just up ahead. Thank you, Miss Hennessy answered calmly. She flicked the horse's reins, her hands firm and back straight, as though nothing out of the ordinary could possibly happen, and continued chatting to Peg, but her voice changed in the same light conversational tone that some of Ma's friends used when they stopped by for a cup of tea. I understand that San Francisco is a vital, energetic town, with great potential for trade by both sea and rail, she said. But all Peg could think about was the little, shiny, silvery handgun hidden in Miss Hennessy's reticule, and the bearded soldier who had stolen some of her money. Peg tensed at the sound of the horse's hooves increasing, and the patrol rolled into view, but she sighed with relief when she saw it was a different group of soldiers. The bearded thief was nowhere in sight. Miss Hennessy obediently pulled the horse to a stop on the patrol leader's orders and smiled at him. My daughter and I have a letter of safe passage from General John Bassett. Would you like to see it, Sergeant? Corporal, he barked, and he reached into her reticule. He said, just hand over your bag, ma'am. I'll get the letter myself. As you wish, Miss Hennessy said. She immediately handed him the reticule, but Peg held her breath. The gun. He's got to discover the gun. The corporal's fingers explored the small bag, but he came out with the letter, not the handgun. Peg's breath came out with a whoosh of relief. Obviously, the handgun wasn't in the reticule. Where was it? The corporal squinted, his lips moved as he slowly read the letter. From what I can make out, he finally said, you live in St. Joe, you've been down the river road to see your sister. That's correct, Miss Hennessy said. She smiled at him shyly. He folded the letter and stuck it inside the reticule and handed it to Miss Hennessy. We can go now, Peg thought with relief. Even though she was Union, too, as were most of her friends in St. Joe, Peg had enough of the Union patrols. One of the soldiers had leaned on the horse to peer in the buggy. Box of something back here, he said to the corporal. As he pushed at the box, Peg shouted, watch out for the eggs, they'll break. Ma'am, you and your little girl climb down from the buggy, Corporal said. We're going to do a search. Nothing special, just routine. A search for what? Miss Hennessy answered. The corporal didn't answer. As she stood by the buggy with Miss Hennessy, Peg watched with wide eyes, and a soldier examined every single egg, accidentally cracking 2 of them. As he opened the pickle jars and plunged his fingers inside, Peg grimaced in disgust. She'd been looking forward to munching those sweet, crispy pickles, but now she wouldn't touch them. 2 of the soldiers crawled out of the buggy, examining seats, the canopy, and even the underside. Another soldier checked the trappings on the horse. What if Miss Hennessy had hidden her gun somewhere in the buggy? The soldiers would find it. But they came up empty. Perhaps I could help you if you'd only tell me what the purpose is of your search, Miss Hennessy said, but without a word the corporal motioned for her to get back in the buggy, and she and Peg had seated themselves. He handed Miss Hennessy the reins and said, you can go now. Stirring up a choking cloud of dust, the soldiers dug their boots into their horses' flanks and galloped off. Peg squinted and rubbed the dust from her eyes. I thought they'd find your gun, she said. Miss Hennessy smiled. I realized I'd been reckless in keeping it inside my reticule. She told Peg it's safely tucked in the pocket of my skirt. Peg twisted to look at the road in the direction the soldiers had ridden. What will you do if one of them rides back to rob you, like last time? Oh, I don't think we'll have that problem again. Peg settled back and began to relax. What were they looking for? Well, the corporal wouldn't tell us, Miss Hennessy answered. Can you guess? Miss Hennessy stared straight ahead, her eyes on the road. She answered, I haven't the vaguest idea. Peg stole a quick glance at Miss Hennessy's profile, which was calm and impassive, and told her nothing. Miss Hennessy's answer had made perfect sense. Peg had heard her ask the corporal why the buggy was being searched. So why, Peg wondered, did she have the strange feeling that Miss Hennessy did know what the soldiers were looking for?